Foreign drivers? Cabotage? Visas? What are we talking about here, anyways? Hello, and welcome to Trucking Answers. I'm Mark, your interviewed driver. Freightwaves recently ran an article about cabotage and the misuse of visa drivers in the United States, and I'm in the article. No, I'm not someone who's being misused in the United States because of a visa, but I was interviewed for the article, and I hope you'll read it. The link is in the description. So there are two things going on here in the industry, which we all know are widespread and are difficult to prove because everybody in the supply chain, how about that word for college people, um, nobody wants anything done about it. Okay, so cabotage is when loads are being hauled in the United States point to point by carriers not authorized to do so. That's for American carriers only. And by the way, for people that think this is some kind of protectionism, nearly every country around the world has these same kind of rules. They started out with just shipping, and as the transportation has grown over hundreds of years, it has grown into other forms of transportation. The other problem, which I think is an even bigger problem in the industry, is the misuse of visa drivers. Now, there are some companies who have to remain nameless because we can't actually have proof of this, although I'd like pictures of it if someone has them, that have recruiting offices around the world, many of them in Eastern European bloc countries and African countries. And they recruit drivers there, get them a visa to come here, provide housing here in the United States for them, and have them travel around as drivers. Now, presumably, this is all legal because the visa is something that companies get because they go cry to the government and say, "Oh, we can't get drivers, so we have to go overseas for drivers because they're required to post jobs here and say, look, we've tried to find Americans and they just won't come and do the work." By the way, most of the carriers doing this always have a ATA logo, American Trucking Association logo on their website. Is that something? Maybe because what thing you don't hear the ATA talking about? The misuse of visa drivers, because it would upset all of their member companies. All right, but that's another thing. And you say, well, Mark, what's the problem with that? If they can't get drivers, they have to get drivers from somewhere. The problem with that is it reduces wages for everyone else. Okay, that's number one problem. When we use someone that is having housing provided for them and they live in a country where the cost of living is somewhat lower than it might be in the United States, this person may be more likely to accept a lower pay, only because they don't have the same cost that someone living here is. And what that does is reduce the wages for everyone else because that carrier then gets an unfair advantage and can take a load that would pay a certain amount, take it for less money, and still make the same money on it. That hurts owner operators, that hurts other carriers trying to do things the right way and hire drivers and pay them properly. All those kind of things. It reduces everyone's wages in the industry overall. The other problem with this that companies love and is bad for the industry is that if you're here from another country on a visa like that, you have to have a job for that visa. The visa part of it is that you're sponsored by a job, okay? You're like, I have this job. They're saying, yes, we're going to hire this person. This person works for us. And that's how you're here. So, are you going to complain about problems that you might see at your carrier? You'd be a lot less likely to complain, I bet, because the carrier is going to be like, oh, you got problems with the place here? If you don't like working here, that kind of thing. Not only would you complain about perhaps working conditions, but safety, equipment problems. So you start complaining that, oh, this trailer has this problem, this truck needs this, and they're like, wow, you complain a lot. Companies don't like people that complain, even about safety issues. They don't like it. They want freight moved. They don't care about safety and all that. That's always way down the list of what companies are concerned about. What they're concerned about is moving freight around, regardless of the quality of the equipment necessarily. So a driver on a visa that has this hanging over their head, who may want to run safely, who may want the equipment fixed, may be less likely to do it for fear of retribution from a company. Now, this wouldn't be in writing. The company says, if you complain, we're going to fire you. That's not said. What is said, off the books is, hey, look what happened to this guy. This could happen to you. The other part of the article deals with cabotage, and I think a lot of this comes from the southern border because it'd be more beneficial to the carriers, in my opinion. When a Canadian driver would come here and perhaps run loads in the United States, they're being paid a proper wage, at least certainly closer to, or maybe even exceeding at some places, what a United States carrier would make. So there's less benefit to them to do that, although maybe some for a carrier, especially if they're not a US based carrier. But companies that do a lot of cross-border freight, and I think we all know who that is, who those companies are, would bring a truck up from Mexico, and it would be allowed to deliver a load here and then take a load back. Companies that do a lot of this cross-border freight would be the ones that would be a problem with this. You'll see some of this on some carriers' trucks. You'll see they have 2 license plates, all right? And that's to get around these kind of rules. They'll have a US plate and a foreign plate on the truck. And that gets around these kind of rules. Once you're past the border patrol, because that's mentioned in the article that this is more of an immigration problem than anything, which is somewhat ironic, there's very little enforcement of this because everyone benefits except the driver. So the carrier benefits because if they can pay somebody less money and very little or no benefits, they save, 20, 40, 80 cents a mile of total cost on the load. So they can either take a load for less money or they get the load for the same money and make more money. The driver may benefit because they may say, well, you're in the United States, you get, so much extra money. So they're not going to say anything. Plus, they're literally hauling loads illegally in the United States. They're not allowed to work here that way. And so they could be deported for that because they're not allowed to work here. That's not what they're here to do, hauling these loads in the United States. So they're certainly not going to say anything about it because, it's kind of, like, come here and arrest me. I'm doing something wrong kind of thing. It benefits everyone except the rest of us because here again, it depresses wages. It depresses rates for owner-operators and carriers that are trying to operate correctly and legally in the United States. It's a huge problem. It's a known problem. It's been a problem for really decades, as far as I can know, and maybe even way longer than that. And no one does anything about it because companies that benefit from it, okay, the carriers, which is always, again, a larger carrier, same carriers, isn't that something? They benefit from it, so they're not going to say anything. They give money to an organization that represents them, say, I don't know, ATA or I don't know what other organization. And so that organization, when we go to Open Secrets, donates money to politicians, both sides, by the way. All right, and so politicians, less likely to do anything about it. If I call them and say something about it, oh, well, they look up, did Mark give me any money? Oh, he sent 48 cents. All right. But then they go to the ATA, and they, of course, have some legal consultant, oh, this is not as big a problem or whatever. And so what do they do about it? No, nothing. We go, the ATA, they speak for trucking. Yeah, right. And nothing gets done about it. Nothing. And I'm glad and happy that Freightwaves is on the ball on this one, putting the information out there so that we can get something done about it because it isn't right and it doesn't help anybody except the carriers and the CEOs to get themselves more profits. Trucks that are doing this, I'd like to see impounded on the spot and sold at auction, including the freight in the truck. The carrier would be charged. Companies can be charged with crimes, okay? And CEOs also charged. The drivers doing it, deported, all right? That's how I'd like to solve it. You start doing that and carriers start to get nervous because the equipment, boom, on the spot, just right there, taken from them and sold at a public auction and not to them. Okay, so including all the freight in it gets sold as a fine. The company fined, CEOs charged, company charged criminally. It can happen. So I want to thank Freightwaves for putting this out there and for allowing me to comment in the article too. I really appreciate it, and it's really an honor that they would think, oh well, Mark is has enough information where we're gonna put him in the article too. So I'm quite honored by it. I hope you'll read the article. It's in the description, and make your comments known in the article as well. Because the more of us that spread this kind of information, spread all that around, the better off the whole industry will be. When everybody plays on the same playing field, we can all earn a decent living without, all this stuff interfering with it. All right. So thanks for watching, and we will be back soon with more Trucking Answers.